Like when you have a squad size that has, the same numbers equivalent to like a flippant government high school in South Africa, you just have no clue what's going to happen. Welcome back to Blue Bloods Football, guys, with your host Hamlet here. This is basically a part 2 analysis of what on earth is going on at Chelsea, guys. As you might have seen before, I did a part 1 where I basically explained the tactical reasons things might be going, the reason as to why things might be going terrible at Chelsea. This one's going to be the more important one in my opinion. The basic changes in the backroom staff and the things going on behind the scenes, which have basically resulted in the players having this terrible mental breakdown and shift. Okay, mental breakdown's a bit of an exaggeration, but basically mental shift in playing and how they're showing up to games, and it basically affects the management, coaching staff and the players. So without further ado, this is a long list, guys. And this video is basically inspired by the article that recently came out in The Athletic, which has a paywall. So if you want to go look at that, I think it's worth it. I wouldn't pay for it myself personally. I looked at other YouTubers' content, but it is definitely a massive thing that we've seen happen in the back room, and we've seen all these changes occur. So basically what has happened is that one of the staff members in the Chelsea back room, who has been there since and hasn't been one of the ones that have been fired, have actually come out and spoken to certain journalists, and they've all come together and put together the story as to the issues that might have been going on at Chelsea. Obviously this person's kept anonymous, and I think some people might have an idea who it is. There's only a couple of guys that have been there since the beginning, but yeah, this person has remained anonymous, obviously for fear of losing their job. And this is what this guy has had to say in terms of the mood and what's been going on in the back room. So I'm going to break this video down into a couple of parts. I think there's about, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 4 factors, big factors. There's a lot of underlying ones regarding that, subheadings and stuff, that, have pretty much made up this video. So I'm going to start with the first one. Biggest one, one of the biggest ones is the squad size, guys. As you know, Chelsea has one of the biggest squad sizes in the entire league, and it's been that way for a while, and this is excluding the players on loan. So currently we have about just over 30 squad players in the team, around 33 or so, and we have about 10 to 15 guys on loan. So when they come back, it's just going to be calamities, over 40 players easily in that squad. And the more numbers there is to deal with, the bigger problem that we have. That's the one thing I did mention before when I was speaking about sympathizing with Potter. Despite all the things I didn't like about him, I did acknowledge the fact that the squad size is a problem for any manager that's coming in. Dealing with a lot of people inherently in a role and a job that requires you to deal with almost half of that amount is going to pose a massive problem, especially if you haven't had that problem before. So if we look at the effects squad size have had on the squad, you've seen it, you've heard it from some of the players themselves. Thiago Silva came out and mentioned that there had to be adjustments made to the actual dressing room because of the large number of people that are there. The fact that some players are coming into training every morning, and on match days they don't even know whether they're going to be picked or not because of the sheer number of people. Every time you see, especially under Lampard, there's a new squad being picked, entirely new 11. No one's people who are prophets or whatever can never pick who's going to be in that starting 11. If you're able to pick the successful starting 11 for a Chelsea game recently, and you have my respect. At this point, no one can really predict what it's going to be. I personally don't even think Lampard knows what it's going to be until an hour and a half before kickoff. That's how hectic it is. So a lot of these players show up for training, show up for match days, having a feeling, or a large feeling, that they might not even take part at all. Barely even as a sub. Sometimes we've even seen guys missing from the bench that would normally be a shoo-in for games, like Mason Mount, for example, which is another story because of his contract issues. But it's basically it's a similar feeling of showing up to work and not wanting to be there because you just know what's the point. It's like coming to work on one of those days where there's nothing going on, work is really quiet, there's not much work to do, so it's why am I here kind of thing. And it shows, guys. You can see the performances actually display the fact that something's off there, and a lot of these players have no intrinsic motivation to do anything. Another issue is how the squad size affects the management staff, because they got a sheer number of players they need to keep entertained and form a relationship with. It makes it very hard to manage. A lot of the time, the harmony in the back room and the harmony of what goes on in the back scenes is very important, and it determines how things move forward. Sometimes a lot of these players form a relationship with the kit man or the physio and stuff like that. Now when you got so many players, it's just more people, more chaos, guys. Like when you have a squad size that has, the same numbers equivalent to like a flippant government high school in South Africa, you just have no clue what's going to happen. You know what I mean? Like 33 plus guys in a whole squad, guys. How do you hold training sessions? These are things that are supposed to be intimate. You're supposed to have one-on-ones with players, talk to them, form relationships. The more people there are, the more difficult that is to do. So this leads to our next point, and the fact that numerous players have to be sold next season in order for us to basically balance the books and manage the expectations of each of the players and the staff. And this is not an easy thing to do. You've heard about squad clearouts occurring and the fact that people are like, oh, we want to sell A, B, and C, at least 10 players this season, get rid of all the deadwood and then bring in new players. That's always a conversation, but it never ever happens most of the time. You'll end up selling 3 players a season if you're lucky. Not everyone wants your players. Sometimes you might not sell them at the right price that you think they're worth. Sometimes they may not want to move to whatever location you've picked for them. It's a massive process for each individual player. Now you're thinking of getting rid of at least 10 to 15 guys. That's massive. Plus, you obviously have to put other players out on loan as well. It's calamities, guys. The fact that I even saw this morning when I woke up, there was an article about Chelsea potentially hiring Paul Mitchell, who is a technical director. I think they want him to be the director of football, one of the directors of football, whatever job title they lined up for this guy to help this process. The fact that they're actually hiring people to actually help with this specific process is maddening. It's actually crazy if you think about how hectic things are. So it's not an easy thing to have to get rid of these players. What they planned to do actually was get rid of the players that are in their final years of contract, as well as their second years of contract. Like Kovacic, I think, has 2 years left on his contract, but he's one of the players put on the list to be sold. Mason Mount, I think he has 1. But he wants a big contract. Obviously, negotiations are going bad there. There's Pulisic, there's Ziyech, there's Lukaku who's on loan who they want to actually sell. Azpilicueta, there's just numerous guys that need to be sold, and we don't know if we can actually ship them out. Plus, there's that whole thing of having to sell homegrown players in order to balance the books according to FFP regulations. So Callum Hudson-Odoi and Ruben Loftus-Cheek are also people being looked at to be sold. So this is huge. It's a massive process. Also, just getting rid of players, especially players who've been there a long time and hold the dressing room together, and it always has an effect on the players that are still left there. For example, a player that's been sold that holds together the dressing room and has an effect on other players when he sold was Jorginho. We saw an article about how Jorginho actually had a massive effect on the players around him, and when he was sold, that's actually negatively impacted the rest of the remaining squad. And I mentioned this to a lot of people who also didn't see the value in having Jorginho there as a player. I saw his value beyond the player, and I could see that he was one of the early players who actually communicated with all the other players in a weird way. When you saw the Chelsea videos of people training and a lot of these guys like doing stuff outside of Chelsea or whatever, he was the one guy who actually spoke to other people. You saw certain people always together, like Mason Mount and Chilwell and okay, Chilwell's also one of those guys, to be honest, but yeah, like certain people that were always coupled together, and Jorginho was always the guy who was bouncing in between groups, and he could actually speak multiple languages as well. So a lot of the time he helped make the players that also came in feel at home. Got rid of him like it was nothing, and it's just caused issues. A lot of players are feeling unrest. No one knows who's going to be picked or selected. Like I said, I'm sure the management staff feel similar in that no one knows who's going to have a job or keep their job, which is another point I'm going to get to later. The chain of command is very strange. So I'm sure you guys have heard of certain cases where Todd Boehly would go into the dressing room after a bad performance or even during half time and then basically berate the players and tell them that they're not good enough and they're not doing a good job, etc., which is the coach's job. So that creates some form of imbalance. I remember when that happened under Thomas Tuchel once or twice in the preseason or something, and Tuchel pretty much nipped it in the bud and told them that that's kind of not what you're supposed to do, and I'm supposed to do this and that and certain things. And it's just like all of these problems go back to the ownership, but I'm going to basically sum that up at the end of the video. But the article reports that there was a case where Boehly went into the dressing room after, I can't remember what game it was. It was a Madrid game or something where they had lost, and Lampard had already had a conversation with the players and given the team talk and the whole thing that coaches are supposed to do. And Boehly and Egbali come in and basically berate the players and tell them they're not good enough, etc. And they also pointed blame at a lot of the players that they had purchased, essentially saying that we spent this much money on you, why aren't you performing? Which is just like one of the worst things to do, and it doesn't make sense, and that's not how things work, because the players don't create their value, directly. They don't choose how much they're going to be sold for, or I mean, the most they do is negotiate their contracts, and that's most of the time their agents through them. But a lot of the time they don't create their value from teams. It's not like, me leaving Dortmund, I should be worth 100 million or so. You know what I mean? That's not up to them. So all of these actions from Burley and Ekbali, as much as I try to back them up and support them and be like, okay, they're good signs from the management, and they're doing X, Y, Z. They're showing that they want to be competitive by buying all these players and trying to make changes like immediately. It goes to show that day by day, it's like they don't know what they're doing. The moves that they make are very like rookie-like moves. And I kept backing them and saying that, these guys are businessmen at the end of the day. It doesn't make sense that they do things without some form of a plan or a backup. But it seems like they do things very irrationally, like coming in and firing the entire backroom staff and the medical staff and, all these people without having like immediate replacements and some form of a plan. Even if you do, it still doesn't make sense to make changes at that level that quickly and not expect these kind of repercussions. Like, these guys immediately came in and just started firing everyone. Like, at some point we had Marina, Czech, Bruce Buck, all these guys, plus the medical staff and all these other people in the back room. So the fact that all these guys have been cleared out and then some of those positions still haven't been filled. And he's just doing it as it goes. And he's just trying to rush the process, which is essentially what he's trying to do. And it just doesn't make sense how that works. I don't know if that's how it works in American sports and they can be that overzealous, but it doesn't make sense as to like how he's planning out this process and the steps that him and Ekbali are taking. They're resulting in poor performances. You can see that it's just not working. A blind man can see that things in the back room are causing poor performances. It's leaking out to the staff and therefore the team. Can't even begin to fathom what it must be like to be in that dressing room and what's going on back there. And it's just crazy how a rational billionaire actually gets this far in life and he's able to do what he does, and he thinks that applying, I don't even know if this is how he runs his businesses or if this is what he did for the American sports, but the fact that Todd Burley it's funny, I was about to say Ted Lasso, but the fact that Todd Burley has come in with the mentality that he has, it just baffles me. Like, the fact that he's such a highly profound, renowned businessman, as well as Ekbali, and like the way you're running this is clearly not working. And I'm thinking he's got this method of like tear it down, burn it up, and then build it from the ashes kind of vibe. And we're definitely at the ash state. He's definitely burnt everything down. All the structures have been broken down. He's broken everything from top to bottom. And I don't know if it's going to be fixed. And the thing is, he just has left everything in ruins because, I feel like I'm going in circles. It just doesn't make sense to me. It does not make sense to me. Even the managerial appointments, it's like he looks at managers who pretty much will act as puppets to carry out his plan. And anyone who stands up to his ideas basically doesn't fit the mold. Like, how is it a coincidence that he was never linked with like top managers like Jose Mourinho, Ancelotti, Hansi Flick, these guys that have pedigree, whereas he looks at like, okay, cool, Nagelsmann, but that didn't work because Nagelsmann turned out to be a top manager by rejecting us. Luis Enrique to a degree, but that didn't work out. They didn't want to go with him for unknown reasons. And Vincent Kompany, how does that make sense? So it's just, I keep looking at the ownership every day when it comes to these things. They're doing things, they're being active, but they're doing the wrong things. You know what I mean? But I personally don't know if this method is going to work out. Because this guy speaking to the players in the back room after the coach has already spoken to them, Ted Lasso vibes. Like, it just doesn't make sense. He thinks that we're gonna carry through with spirit and determination and belief, and that's the kind of, you can see that's the logic he used when he was hiring Potter and when he's looking at managers like Kompany and stuff like that. It's funny that at a certain level I feel like you should acknowledge what you don't know and then see if you can understand and try, learn it. At the same time, hire someone in a position to do their job and carry it out. You don't hire a manager, then try to manage. It doesn't make sense. It's clear as day that this club is in tatters, and all of these problems need to be fixed if we want to look to a positive future again. And what's funny about this is, like I said, Pochettino is going to come into this mess. I hope he knows what he's getting himself into. It doesn't make sense that I would and he doesn't. And the fact that even if he chooses to get in despite knowing this shows that this man, I don't know, it feels like he just likes abusive situations with owners where previously working with Daniel Levy, where things weren't great for Tottenham as well, and the ownership was just making his job a lot more difficult. It's going to be the exact same at Burnley, or maybe even worse. So yeah, that's all from me. Blue Bloods Football signing out.